Welcome, everyone, to the online worship service for May 2nd, 2021, with our title for today's service of Bearing Witness for Justice. I'm the Reverend Dr. Julie Kane, and on behalf of the entire congregation, we're glad that you're joining us today on what happens to be the third anniversary of when I was unanimously called by the congregation to serve as your settled minister. Our opening words today are from the Soul Matters UU curriculum, and it's a topic of curiosity and journeying. Welcome to this community of seekers. We have some answers. We don't have all the answers. While we know some things, we don't know everything. And while we each have a life journey and experience that finds some commonality with the lives of others, there are still some among us who have experiences very different from our own. Welcome to this community of seekers, a community full of questions and of possibilities. We pause this morning with gratitude for all who have gone before, for all who have cleared the way and served as guiding lights when our days grew dim. We never walk alone. May our time together help us to remember that. And we pause today in honor of first steps, for beginning even when the path is unclear, for the courage it takes to trust that the way will reveal itself, that light will come to clarify our vision ahead, and that friends will be by our side. Welcome to this community of seekers, a community full of questions and possibilities.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I am Norma Riley, your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, and our failures and our aspirations, and with our joys and our sorrows. Whether you are joining us today for the first time, or you've been a member or a friend for many years, we are glad you are here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. Now, as Dixie Wiles comes forward, let us all say together from our homes the words for lighting the chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join with us as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another.
And before we continue with the rest of our service, as we've done every week since the pandemic quarantine, I invite you into a time of silent reflection. We have so much that we're carrying in our hearts and on our minds. Many of us, if you are like me, are feeling emotionally exhausted, not just by the pandemic, but by other things that are going on in our world and in our country today. So this morning I ask that you join with me and with everyone gathered in spirit to hold in our hearts everyone still battling with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic within our country and beyond. Especially at this time, let's hold in our hearts the people of India who are suffering just tragic losses. We also want to lift up the state of racial justice and injustice within the United States. We had a verdict in the Minneapolis trial, which was surprising. It was a gut-wrenching experience for many of us who were following it. And even though we may have felt some optimism after the verdict, within a short amount of time, we're faced with other incidents that are also gut-wrenching, including that incident that's still underway in response to the situation in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, not too far from here, actually. So please join with me in a time of silence, holding both the burdens of compassion fatigue, of having open hearts that feel the pain of the world, but also inviting in the strength of compassion and our ability to move forward and heal ourselves and each other. Join with me now in the silence. Spirit of life, be with us now and in all the days to come. Blessed be. Our words of meditation today come to us from the wonderful Vietnamese Zen Buddhist priest Thich Nhat Hanh. This is called, "Please Call Me by My True Names." Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second, I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in a clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bone, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names so I can hear all my cries and my laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and my pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion.
This reading is from the UUA supplement called Lifting Our Voices, and it was adapted from the words of UU Minister Barbara Peskin. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names in thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, "No more, never again, remember me." For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves. And forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves grow on our stumps. Give us the courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create peace.
I selected the reading that Norma shared with us today to help us as a community to mourn the extraordinary losses we have witnessed just in this past year, and to call us to the task of remembering, the task of seeing the whole picture, even with its ugliness, and the task of trying to make peace with it all. This is not a passive peace attained by deferential acceptance or resignation. The peace we are called to create is a peace that comes from justice being served, the whole picture taken into account, and those who are responsible for wrongdoing being held accountable, even when it is us. Peace does not come without justice, and justice does not come without accountability. We have all had a terribly difficult year with COVID-19. Even those of us who are so much more fortunate than others of our brothers and sisters with whom we currently share this precious planet. Individually, we have not been able to operate in our usual modes. We're all being emotionally taxed during this time of the pandemic, even if we've been spared proximity with the deadly virus itself. And just when things seem to be improving, a light at the end of the tunnel with the availability of vaccines, we realize we have still a ways to go. And it's very likely things will not be going back the way that they were before this pandemic. We are having to re-envision how we do so many things, including church. We're anxious to get back to meeting together in person and at the same time, but we have to proceed cautiously so as to protect the health of those most vulnerable among us and around us. So, just as things have begun to improve on the COVID front, at least here in the United States, finally, we are seeing new waves of its impacts in other countries with variants of the virus. And those variants, of course, are coming our way too. COVID is not really over yet, and we have to pace ourselves and not jump ahead too quickly to resume our previous levels of social activity. Meanwhile, some of the other social threats that existed prior to COVID have made a comeback on the national American scene. We had seen a slowing down of mass shootings and incidents of violence toward unarmed people of color, but now in just these recent weeks, these incidents have reemerged almost like a cancer recurring with a vengeance. 50 mass shootings in 1 month's time? A reemergence of hate crimes against Asian Americans? I say reemergence because the recent violence against Asian Americans is not the first wave of this kind of attitude and activity in our country. I don't know about you, but I was taken by surprise by the full public broadcast of the court proceedings in the trial over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis last Memorial Day weekend. It's a landmark case in a few ways, but perhaps most importantly for my message today, if it were not for the phone camera of a 17-year-old teenage bystander, the verdicts were likely to go another way than the way they did. To say that the guilty verdict on all 3 charges was a surprise is an understatement. Given our country's long history of siding with the official story given by those in positions of power and authority, especially in matters that apply to African Americans. Our criminal justice system is rampant with a long-standing culture of white supremacy. Fortunately, more and more white Americans are beginning to wake up for the first time, these long-standing patterns. And with this personal proximity of witnessing, we are starting to see things very differently than before. The teenager who filmed the long and excruciating death of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer on a Minneapolis street in the daylight is a phenomenal example of bearing witness for justice. And for those millions of viewers in the United States and around the world who drew the courage to watch her video, we became examples of bearing witness for justice too, potentially. As I watched portions of the trial in Minneapolis, I was reminded of the only time I was called to serve on a jury. I had received previous notices to appear for a jury pool, but this was the only time I've been selected to be on the jury itself. It was the year after I had completed seminary, and I was in my first ministry post in the Sierra Nevada foothills of Northern California, about an hour from Lake Tahoe. It was a medical malpractice case resulting from the death of a woman that occurred at the Lake Tahoe hospital. The woman's attending physician at the hospital was being charged by the family for negligence in the matter of her death. The accused doctor was represented by a male attorney, and the family of the woman who lost her life was represented by a female attorney. The case of negligence was being driven by the fact that something unusual was occurring, and the attending physician, when he had multiple opportunities to consult other doctors to help diagnose the situation, decided not to and acted on his own. The jury I served was predominantly white with a good mix of balance in males and females, and there were 2 people of color. The trial lasted 2 full weeks, and in the end, unlike the Chauvin trial, which required a unanimous verdict or it would go to mistrial, the jury I served on was decided by a majority vote of the jurors. At the end of the trial, the doctor was not charged with negligence. It was a vote of 9 innocent and 3 guilty. I was one of the 3 who voted that he was actually guilty of negligence, along with the 2 men of color, one African American and one Latino. I spent a lot of time reflecting on the jury proceedings and that final vote, which was difficult to accept. And what I felt I learned from the experience is that there were important power differentials in play throughout the case. A male doctor with a male attorney against a female victim who was deceased, and the female attorney representing her family. I watched what I perceived to be stronger expert witnesses for the prosecution to go against weaker experts for the defense. And yet, the majority of the jury favored the defense of the doctor. Doctors, along with clergy and police, are placed in a role of authority where trust in their judgment is bestowed by people in critical situations needing protection and safety. We know all too well that doctors and clergy are capable and do indeed at times violate the trust of those who place trust in them. Vulnerable people in vulnerable situations. Overall, our default setting is that doctors, clergy, and police are supposed to be trustworthy because of their professions, and this is part of what keeps order in our society. These days, and for some time now, we know that doctors have to take professional responsibility with malpractice insurance. We also know that clergy have been more accountable for misconduct by their denominations, but we still have a ways to go, especially if we look at the Catholic Church and a history of charges of sexual impropriety. I suggest that law enforcement trails behind these other professions in terms of accountability for malpractice or negligence. As predominantly white people, most of our personal encounters with law enforcement do not call into question their human fallibility. But if you are a woman or a person of color or a poor person who has been victimized by acts of aggression or impropriety by someone who has more power than you, let's face it, you will not be offered the same amount of protection than if you are a white person, especially a male, with a status of power through profession or money. At a gut level, we know this is not fair, but alas, it is the way the world has been working for quite some time now. In this emotionally exhausting time in which we live, it is more visible and apparent than ever that we do not generally live by that golden rule of treating our neighbor as we would like to be treated. But we are seeing a pretty massive shift happening right under our feet. Through our global technology, we are able to bear witness as we have never been able to before. We have opportunities to witness and connect with those who are having vastly different life experiences than our own. And just as we are forging new skills to navigate the amazing technological communication channels available to us, which we need now more than ever with the pandemic, we are also forging new skills of building our capacity for empathy, for compassion. That literal adage of walking a mile in another person's shoes. And it is changing us. We realize we are more connected than we even know, and that, like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, whenever there is injustice anywhere, there is injustice everywhere. It really takes a lot to bear witness for justice. There are significant costs involved, and too often the heartfelt investment of our best intentions, our compassion, and our empathy does not pay off. All we can do is all we can do. We have to give it our best effort and recover from the setbacks when they come. When it comes to racial justice in the United States, we still have such a long way to go, my friends, despite the landmark verdict in Minneapolis. It's been 30 years since the verdict in the trial of the beating of Rodney King went another way. And yet, while we were waiting for the verdict in Minneapolis, the nation was poised for a similar response if the Minneapolis verdict had gone the usual way of acquittal. In the coming weeks, I will be building on today's topic of racial justice in Sunday services in a book discussion group that I'll be launching soon around the book called Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and in my minister's proposal for our congregation to be involved over the next year with what is called the Eighth Principle Project, an initiative to add an eighth principle to our 7 existing UU principles as a long-term congregational effort, perhaps even as our social justice theme of the year, with the goal of dismantling racism and oppression within our institutions, in ourselves, and in society. In closing, I want to offer the words of 2 women who are great examples of bearing witness for justice. These are found in our hymnal. The first words are attributed to the great Catholic relief worker, Dorothy Day. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel helpless. There's too much work to do. And the second reading by the cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. May it be so.
Heaven knows where we are going.
As Dixie Wiles extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope that you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org. This will allow us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which continue while we are not able to be physically together. We invite you to join our church community at noon at our virtual post-service gathering for Joys and Concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout groups. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSV email. Thank you for joining us today.
Today's closing words are by the Unitarian Universalist minister Barbara Wells. O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who are gathered together be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web of life that is strong, everlasting, and beautiful. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. Stay safe, stay strong, take really good care of yourselves these days as we pace ourselves for the months still ahead, and we look forward to seeing you next time.